The last shepherding school vocational training program for grazers um, was in the region of Catalunya and up into a different part of the Pyrenees. It was quite an adventure because communication was very little at the time based on cell phone reception up in the Pyrenees. And I just put the name of the small little village that the school had headquartered from, and just started trekking, trekking up north and on a single dirt road up into the Pyrenees, and came across this really beautiful little old town, not fully inhabited, but one of the structures it acts as a hostel, and all the trainees of the school come together to live for about 1 to 2 months and do all of their intensive technical training living in community. The Escola de Pastors de Catalunya is a project under the Socio Urbans, and this is in Montenartro, Lieda, Catalonia. This is just a screen grab from the school's website, translated, of course, promoting new peasants or new pastoralists or grazers. La Escola de Pastors de Catalunya, again under the Association of Urbans, their mission is to preserve rural pastoralism through ecological approaches. So they really have the lens of agroecology and regenerative agriculture and food sovereignty methodologies. They embrace the tenets of land access, and they're huge collaborators in a variety of projects of all kinds in celebrating or preserving the small farmer agricultural practices and education, as well as land stewardship. There's about 22 trainees per cohort. The ages range from 19 to 40, but the average is between 29 and 31 years old. A lot of these students come from already having higher education, and the ages somewhat indicate that they've already had a previous career. When I interviewed some of the students, I found that some of them too were kind of this idea of the neo-rurals coming from urban or suburban areas and really looking to have a different type of vocation and lifestyle, and really choosing this type of work as small farmers or as agrarians or grazers as both a political statement and also a search for having a quality of life that is rewarding. The training's about 6 months long. 2 of those months are immersive, living in community together. That was something unique about this school that I really enjoyed, is that they focused on building camaraderie between the students. Financial support is fully covered through government subsidies for students under 30 years old for economic development, rural development, through these funds for rural development and agriculture. To put a student through the 6-month program is about 4,000 euros, but only 800 euros are translated to the students who do have to pay. And this is through subsidies, mostly government aid. The school is also umbrellaed from Urbans, but it's also a project of Gripia. Living in community for the first few months, getting to know each other. It was encouraged from the get-go of everyone to bring something from their home or a book from their library to put together. You'll see all kinds of things that people have brought from different areas representing their different regions of Catalunya. Some came from the Basque Country. Where they are operating is in a national park in the Pyrenees. And I love, and of course that's in Catalan, but I love all of the words that students came up with to talk about how they are first feeling about their first their first weeks together, and I got to come in the very beginning of this particular cohort. Of course, sitting around after breakfast, getting ready for studies. It's really where a lot of the learning and cross cultural exchange happens. I got to sit in on a class with the students. It was kind of tough to follow because it was in Catalan, but I got to see how the one of the guest lecturers, who's a veterinarian, how she kind of broke down reproduction of sheep, and I think this may have been from an equine or cow. I can't tell at this point. But that was really great to sit in on a course to kind of see the interaction and how classes were conducted. These are all shots from the school itself, and you can kind of see um, how awesome how awesome this school is in terms of their visual storytelling. Super relatable for a next generation. Very visual and beautiful, bucolic. Of course, a lot of folks on Instagram or whatever who see or Facebook who see these types of photos just really get excited about it and kind of glamorize it. But of course, for those of us who know what it's like to work with livestock or farming, it can look very beautiful and very photogenic, bucolic lifestyle. But of course, it's much more difficult and hands-on than you could ever imagine if you haven't had that experience. The school really focuses on real people with families, modern day context of like what it means to be a farmer, how to live. This was a trainee of the school. Her name is Laura. She's in her early 20s. She's also considered a neo-rural. She chose to come to the school because she really was focusing on having creating a quality of life that she believed in. She didn't want an office job. She wanted to work with the earth and be a part of food sovereignty movement and ecological preservation of the region where she's from. So she decided to go to the shepherding school for this reason. And many of these students come from these non-traditional agricultural backgrounds. He was one of the very dedicated shepherds. It was really great to be at a training program where I felt like I was amongst peers and could imagine peers in the Western United States going through this similar training. It was really encouraging to see that this is happening and it's great, and these folks are working and finding jobs and creating businesses after these trainings. The cool thing about this particular school is that they collaborate in having their students go into working in specific projects with other organizations. Here are a few of those projects. One is Puros Life, and it's a project that preserves the brown bear. However, the brown bear lives in areas in which sheep producers also work to produce and graze their sheep, and so working for the conservationists for the brown bear with the school, they've created this program, Puros Life, where the shepherds are managing the farmers' sheep to manage for predation, and really working to create a bridge between the producers who are trying to protect their sheep and their livelihood with those who are trying to protect this species of animal that is sharing the environment in which these animals graze. Really cool project. Another key component of this school is the access to land project, where the school is a part of a network, a grassroots network of organizations that work to secure land for small farmers. They work in public education, advocacy, a lot of, again, the grassroots social movements and connecting farming organizations with one another, and creating pathways for new farmers with farm incubators. Project Life Montserrat. Montserrat is right outside of Barcelona, And we got to go and visit, and unbeknownst to us, they were using grazing as a tool for a restoration project in a meadow. Guido was on a morning hike and came up, heard goats and found goats, and then found remnants of electric fence line. So we were able to see how these parks and open spaces are using grazing for regenerative management efforts, and the school participates in that and providing opportunities for their trainees to get on the ground experience, as well as to serve these awesome projects. Another important project to note is Escola, which is celebrating the regional sheep and the fiber that it produces to create beautiful clothing. The fall collections translated to inland landscapes. Escola, very close to Fibershed and its pursuits. They pride themselves on ecological fashion and sustainability measures, and supporting the tradition and culture of sheep and shepherding. They provide like a tour group experience where you can kind of go and see what it's like with the shepherd and the sheep, and to kind of see the full circle of their products of Escola. And you can find them simply online. They're doing pretty cool stuff. So of those 4 schools, and in summarizing the research, we really found that cultural preservation was a very big piece of what these schools were providing for their larger communities, because the landscape and also the vocation and the preservation of these landscapes and cultures very, very significant, and the government valued what this vocation offers. It to kind of speak to Fred and Michelle's work and the art and science of shepherding. It's really that marriage of the theoretical, technical training with experiential learning, and how the crossing of wisdom and experience from those with many years in the vocation, how important that is. And in moving forward, it's very clear that science and researchers and practitioners really need to work together to create the foundation for us to move forward in supporting vocations as shepherds, because we're certainly, as grazers and agrarians, working to do good things for economy and the environment, and in social, both social impact and cultural preservation. We need all hands on deck, and that was something that was reiterated in the training and the curriculum, where was the approach that had to have both things. It couldn't all be indoors in the classroom, nor could it all be just an apprenticeship. All schools had some sort of emphasis on agricultural sustainability, food security, and a lot of the students were choosing this path for quality of life. Definitely no mention of making money. Curricula commonalities, place-based, again, technical and experiential training. There was the production aspect of the dairy, meat, and fiber. The professional development was pretty much the main, the underlying goal for all of these training programs was for translation into having a profession in this field. The programs were either 6 months to 2 years, depending on both the diploma or accreditation, and also what the emphasis was in terms of dairy production, or was it the seasonal transhumanant salaried shepherd type of job. a lot of the financial and institutional structure was dependent on both government subsidies and then larger academic or institutional structuring, just like the CFPPA, which is supported by the Ministry of Agriculture. You see that there's larger umbrellas of established organizations or institutions that already have a structure working with the government, and then the training programs are within that. So in the United States, it would look like if we had a university, private university, or even a public university that would house a grazer as a vocation kind of department, but mostly geared to a continuing education. So that would be like the University of California Extension Services, something like that. That kind of was the structuring that seemed to be the most common. Collaborations were huge within industry of the farmers and producers, public agencies, national parks, regional communities, private communities, like in Provence, the homeowners association kind of idea of grazing access to those open spaces or as a service, and support networks. There's a lot of organizations that were supportive of grazers and salaried shepherds to get jobs. A lot of these schools had 1 to 2 full-time administrators, but then would have guest instructors that were specialized to certain subjects. The average operating costs were about 100,000 euros a year. Again, different durations of time, different numbers of students. Full tuition covered full tuition costs for students was on average 4,000 euro. Full tuition up to $4,000, 4,000 euro for students. So it's a range of how much subsidy a student is able to receive. The demographics averaged 27 to 31, but the range was anywhere within the last few years, 19 to 45. You see the neo-rurals. You see an increase of female applications. Ratios are about 40 to 60%, and the hope is that you see that continuing to level. And a big part of that is the adaptation of the systems of the schools for those who go up into the Alps. The chalets, how are the chalets designed for families to live, just like Andre Leroy and his wife and raising 2 children? How have the chalets been renovated to support a small family? Also, depending on where one is in their life, women who are around 26, they say if you don't have a partner, you have to be conscious of where you're at in your life if you want to have a family or not, because you're living in complete seclusion, and that's something to consider, and that is actually a part of the conversation in curriculums is a essential piece to point out is where are you in your life, how do you want to live, and a lot of the kind of adaptation to the comforts of being a vocational shepherd is noteworthy. Again, that's just the re-emphasizing of the modernizing of this ancient vocation. You have technology being a part of creating feasibility in this modern day. So this sense of modernizing this ancient vocation with having satellites for cell phone reception or computer internet accessibility, cell phones, helicopters bringing in provisions on a regular basis, whereas in the past it could have been on a mule or a donkey out in the western United States, where the foreman would bring provisions, but it would be on horseback or mule or burro. They're using helicopters in the Alps, and the chalets are designed for families instead of the single shepherd. So when I think about what is this idea of modernizing this ancient vocation in the context of the Western United States, when we think about having grazing be a service, managed grazing be a service, a public service, a public safety service, say using grazing to reduce vegetation at a wide scale in a short duration of time. Um, what if we had grazers that were trained from the city who were managing these livestock along the city's peripheries in the open space? So they're actually close to home, but they're trained and they go out seasonally during these short periods of time to manage vegetation for, say, fire hazard reduction. What if these shepherds had access in their camp trailers, should they be on site 24/7, to internet for online coursework? There's so many creative ways you can start thinking about how to integrate technology where it's stacked, because there is a lot of downtime in shepherding. When you're on, but when you're off, you can sit and watch the animals graze or browse, which I definitely recommend. Or in this new idea of having the urban grazers, perhaps time is utilized using to do virtual classwork, or even just connection to family if you're rural or in seclusion. So there's a lot to be said about this idea of the modernizing of the same ancient vocation. And this photograph was also from Rubens' the Escola de Pastor de Catalunya. Translating again to our Western context, United States, we have to really think about a place-based, inspired training that's responding to our specific needs and our specific challenges, and our specific opportunities. And we need to respond to our culture and traditions and needs and changing conditions within our regions. So it might not be one vocational program, but many, because of all of these unique things in our very grand landscapes of the United States. So when we're envisioning this grazers program here, we have to take into consideration all of these diverse bits, and see how a vocational training program can support grazers and businesses that focus on land management and understand what our agricultural scene is. All of these pieces that are unique to place. These are some of the questions, or some of the ideas. Is online coursework in the sheep camp while animals are grazing? How do we collaborate with a number of different types of organizations that are looking for job development and placement for various types of populations and demographics that haven't been traditionally a part of working with livestock on the land? How can we create jobs as ecological doctors, as land and livestock stewards? These communities could be youth at risk from the inner city, veterans, previously incarcerated individuals. All kinds of individuals can be considered, opportunities, be considered folks to have opportunities in working in this work. This then, in essence, creates an amazing platform for building more cultural connection to the environment, supporting work ethic, using our bodies, labor, and having more general awareness with food and fiber, having livestock really be a positive, interactive thing within our landscapes and the urban wild frontier or border or connection and bridge. I think they call that the wild urban corridor. If that makes sense.